Hi there, this is Mrs. Schlecht, and in this video, we're going to go over how to find distances on a coordinate plane. All right, my friends, so you know that there's a few materials you're going to need to help you be successful for this lesson. First, you're going to need your Envision book with the little robot on it. Second, you're going to need your math notebook to take those great notes. Third, you're going to use a pencil. And fourth, that positive math attitude. All right, so if you look at lesson 2-5 in your Envision book, the whole thing goes over finding distances while looking at these coordinate planes. The key concepts page, which you know is Mrs. Schlecht's all-time favoriteest, can be found on page 102 in your Envision book. But before we get into using that coordinate grid to find distances, my friends, I'd like to just take a quick recap, a quick look again at all four of those quadrants. All right, my friends. So if you remember, lesson 2-4, which we went over last week, introduced us to four whole quadrants on this coordinate plane. Remember, we're used to being over here and living in this area. That's where we've been graphing points since like fourth grade, right? But since now we're learning about positive numbers and negative numbers, now we have more areas on our grid, right? We have more opportunities, my friends. We can move all over the place, not just in one little quadrant anymore. We're expanding our horizons, my friends. So one thing I'd like to point out really quickly for this grid, remember my friends, this line right here, the line that goes like side to side, that's your x-axis. And this always and forever is the first number that we're looking at, okay? So when you have these ordered pairs, which we'll get to in a second, the very first number that you see always in that ordered pair is going to go along this straight line, right? This side to side line, this horizontal line, because that is our x-axis. Now remember, we can also go up and down. We can ride that elevator up and down in our building, correct? So this is our y-axis. And y can also be positive. Y can also be negative as well. But you guys know that from last week, right? But just remember, my friends, that the y value is always the second number that is in that the coordinated pair, correct? So first number will go somewhere side to side. Second number will then go up and down, all right? Do you remember what's so special about each of these quadrants? All right, first quadrant one, this is where my positive x and my positive y live. Next, we have quadrant 2, where we have a negative x because we're walking backwards away from 0, but we're still riding that elevator up, my friends, so we'll have a positive y, right? So quadrant 2, negative x, but a positive y. All right, over here in quadrant 3, notice we still have that same negative x, just like we had in that second quadrant, but instead of riding the elevator up, I'm now going to ride this elevator down. So again, my friends, in quadrant 3, we have a negative x and a negative y coordinate, right? Lastly, my friend, we have the fourth quadrant. And if we're looking, do you notice any patterns? We got positive, positive, negative, positive, negative, negative. Now we have a positive, negative. So it's really cool, in case you haven't noticed, that each of my x and each of my y values, they can be positive, they can be negative, they can be positive together, they can be negative together, they can have opposite signs, right? There's like so many possibilities, my friends, right? And we're using that information, we're looking at the signs of those numbers to help us figure out where the heck it goes on our grid, right? So remember, positive, positive for number 1, negative, positive for number 2, negative and negative for number 3, positive and negative for number 4. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Are you ready to like do some cool practice? You are. Guess what? Me too. All the way. Totally. Okay. So here's what I'd like you to do. Please open your books to page 102. Yes, that's the same page that also has those key concepts, but we're going to look at those problems, those do you know how problems, starting with number 4. Again, that is going to be on page 102. And so if we're looking at problem number 4 on page 102, you'll notice that it's giving you an ordered pair. it's actually giving you two ordered pairs, right? So let's, the first ordered pair is going to be -5, +2. So a negative x and then a positive y, we're gonna go over here in the second quadrant, all right? Now, I know my graph might be a little bit hard for you to see. Just so you know, the scale that Mrs. Schlecht used, I did not just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I actually counted by halves, okay? So my point of origin, that's 0, 0, you know that. My next one then was 1/2, and then I had 1, and then 1.5 and 2, and so on, okay? Now, these plots, these points, will still all be able to like work out. But if we kind of look a little bit further down this page, we're gonna need some like half numbers and all that sort of stuff, okay? But just make sure that you know it doesn't really matter that Mrs. Schlecht is not using a one-to-one scale, right, for this coordinate grid at this moment in time. We're smart, we can adapt, we can like estimate. Well, we got it, we got it. And so this first ordered pair is for number 4, correct? Just to make sure that we remember, the first number, so in this case, -5, that is going to go along the x-axis, right? That long straight line. And then, of course, you know that that second number involves the y-axis, correct? And that's going to be however you ride that elevator, either up or down. So when we are plotting these points, I'm going to first look at this -5, all right? -5, remember, that's going to go along this line. But if I look, all of these values are positive, right? And that makes sense because we have positive x down here, right? I want a negative. So we know I'm going to be on this side of 0, right? Because I want that -5. So I'm going to go over to my number line. -5 is right here, all right? And then let me move Mrs. Schlecht's head. But then we have that +2. And remember, my friends, if it's positive, I want to be up here in this second quadrant, correct? So again, I'm going to go find my x at -5, and then I'm going up to +2, excuse me. And where they intersect, right there, is the point -5, 2. I've noticed some kids have problems with when we're plotting these points, the dot does not go in the box, it goes on like the intersection, okay? So if you're looking at grid paper and it has like blue lines or something like that, the points that we're talking about is where those two lines meet, okay? So not in the square, not in the center. We're trying to nail it down to a point, okay? Think of like an intersection of that y and that x, wherever that intersection is, that's where that point actually lives at, okay? And that second ordered pair in number 4 that you'll need to graph is right here, -5, +6. Notice, my friends, we still have a negative x, just like we did in this first pair. We have a positive y, just like we did in this first pair. So it's still going to be in this same neighborhood. But let's see, is it going to be on the exact same point? No, it's not. You know that, don't you? Okay, so my x is going to stay the same. That's going to be -5. Again, we already know that it's along this line. My y tells me that I am going to ride the elevator up to the 6th floor. So I went in here. The 6th floor is right about here where my eye is, right there. So again, my friends, for this first step, for part number 4, question number 4, excuse me, is I just took those two ordered pairs and then I plotted them, okay? Now, I want you to look at these ordered pairs. What do you notice here? We have a -5 and a -5. And if you like look, they're like up and down on that graph and everything. That's because they have the same x-axis, the same value on that x, right? So they're actually like, they're like right in line. They're like line buddies, right? But in this lesson, we want to know what's the distance, what's the space that's between our first point, that -5, +2, and that second point, which is -5, +6. So, do you guys remember absolute value? Yeah, do you remember absolute value? We're going to use some of that absolute value stuff here. I know, it's so cool. So thinking about that absolute value, again, I want to know, well, what's the difference between this second point and this first point? Like how many units is Mrs. Schlecht moving? Okay. Now, if we think about this, my friends, -5 and a -5, I am not moving anywhere closer to my 0, correct? This is all staying on that same line. But I did ride the elevator up, right? I want to know how many floors did I ride this elevator up? I started at that second floor, but then I went up to the 6th floor. So let's think of absolute value. 6 minus 2, what is that? 4. So I only went up 4 units, my friends. So for question number 4, when it's asking you what's the difference or what's the distance between your first ordered pair, which was -5, +2, and your second ordered pair, which was -5, +6, what's the distance between there? It's just 4 spots. Look at another one. So this is number 7 on page 102, but I just want to point out, Mrs. Schlecht has kind of changed some numbers. The X values are still the same as they were in the book, but I had to change my Y because my graph doesn't go up to 8. So I just kind of adjusted that. So we're going to have -6 and a -6 for our Y value in both of these ordered pairs. And again, that's just so that I'm able to fit it on here. Okay. But all the other stuff will be fine. It'll all work out. Don't worry. First step is I'm going to graph these points, all right? So I'm gonna look at -2 and 1/4, and then that -6. So a negative and a negative, that tells me I'm gonna be living over here in that third quadrant, correct? So remember, Mrs. Schlecht is using halves as my scale, and 1/4 is just half of a half, right? So I'm gonna kind of be in between a little bit, but it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Hey, it's okay. So we're gonna first look at -2 and 1/4. So again, since that's a -x, it's over here. Here's -2.5 and -2. Remember, -2 and 1/4 is like halfway between those two, right? So I'm kind of like in between. I'm not really on a line, but I'll be kind of over here. And then I go down to 6. 6, luckily I have right here. Okay, so I'm gonna follow this down to right about there. Okay, and again, my friends, that point right there represents that -2 and 1/4 and then -6. Now, our second point is actually going to be over here in positive land, right? That's super duper cool. Ooh, but Mrs. Schlecht just realized that, oh, my X over here only goes up to 6. So, you guys ready to see some live action adjustments being made? Oh yeah, we're just gonna change this to a 5. Look at 5, +5 3/4. Again, since that's positive, it's going to be over here, right, in my positive happy land. But then I have that -6, so that's still going to go down as well. All right. So our +5 3/4 would be right about here, and then our second or our Y value is -6. So I'm going to go right about there, my friends. All right, so again, all I did was I just graphed our 2 points. So this point over here, again, is for -2 and 1/4 and -6. And then, my friends, my point over here is for +5 3/4 and -6. Now, just like we were doing in that other problem, notice that my Y values are the same, right? I am not moving the elevator up or down at all in this problem, correct? We're just moving side to side, all right? But how far did I move side to side? So now let's think about this. If we remember, I was over here, -2 1/4, okay? But think, in order to get back to 0, back to my happy place, I have to at least go 2 and 1/4, right? I need to undo that negative number by adding the opposite, right? Which will then bring me back to 0, okay? But I have more I need to do. So I've already added 2 and 1/4, but I still need to keep adding so that I'm able to get to 5 and 3/4. All right, my friends? So what we can do is we can just add that absolute value of both of these numbers, and that will give me the number of units or the number of steps Mrs. Schlecht took from the first point to the second point. Add some fractions. Remember, I'm getting this from our absolute value because, again, my friends, I'm trying to see what that distance is. I'm trying to see how much I moved, right? So I know that the absolute value of negative 2 1/4 is just 2 1/4. The absolute value of 5 3/4 is just 5 3/4. So now I'm just going to add, my friends. Notice that I have 1/4 plus 3/4. When I add those together, I'd get 4/4, which you know is just a whole. So we can think about this as 2 plus 5, which is 7, plus that 4/4, which is 1. So what's 7 plus 1? 8. It's a crazy wacky 8 that Mrs. Schlecht just drew, right? So that means that from this first point to that second point, we had to take 8 little steps, right? 8 units that we needed to move over in order to find that new second point. We end this video, my friends. There is one more example I want to go over. This is not in your book. This is just something that Mrs. Schlecht wants to work through. Okay, so our first ordered pair is +1, -4, positive and negative. It's going to be over here. So again, I'm going to graph +1, -4. My second point is now going to be -5, -4. So since I have a negative x and a negative y, it's going to be over here in that third quadrant, my friends. So again, now I'm going to graph -5, -4. Graphed both of these points, correct? And if we look, we notice that they have the same y value, correct? So that means I'm not riding the elevator up, I'm not riding the elevator down. I was just walking across that building. So now let's think of that absolute value, my friends. What is 1 plus 5? Remember, we're thinking of absolute value, and you know that's 6, and that makes sense, right? I had to do 1 unit before I could get to 0, and then I had to keep going 5 more units once I got to 0. So that 1 positive unit and then those 5 negative units was a total of 6 units that we had to walk from this first point to that second point. Friends, that was just a quick run through for lesson 2-5, which again talks about finding distances using that coordinate grid. If you have any other questions, please let me know.